first speaker is Maria Powell from the Midwest Environmental Justice Organization, the director. She's going to talk about PFAS, soil and water contamination, and cleanup.
I'm Maria Powell. I'm the Executive Director of the Midwest Environmental Justice Organization, and thank you all for coming on this snowy day. Our organization has been working on PFAS for about 2 years now, so I have a lot to say, and I'm hoping the moderator can cut me off at the appropriate time. So what are PFAS and why are they a big problem? I'm going to go through this really broadly and generally, and some other people will follow up on it. PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. There are about 4,000 to 6,000 plus different kinds of them, but in this case we're mostly focused on the PFAS that are used in firefighting foams at Truax and AFFF foams. They are known as forever chemicals because they don't break down in the environment. They also don't break down in our bodies, and they build up in fish and in our bodies. And they're also very mobile in the environment, so they can travel miles and miles. They're associated with a growing number of very serious health problems. I will just give a laundry list, and then Beth Neary will say more after me. Immune and thyroid dysfunction, developmental problems, high cholesterol, pregnancy complications, kidney and liver disease, various cancers, and more. And of course, as always, pregnant women and children are far more vulnerable than everyone else. Beth can take it from there. So at Truax, we have several really bad hotspots of PFAS. I don't know, I hope everyone can see those numbers. One of them has up to 46,000 parts per trillion of a total of 6 PFAS. Now there's likely a lot more than that there, as they haven't measured very many yet. These tests are very minimal. They're just shallow groundwater and shallow soils. They haven't done anything beyond a few tests actually. So what does that mean? What do those numbers mean? Recently, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services proposed a 20 part per trillion standard for PFOA and PFOS. So you can see these levels are way above that. And then, so the other big issue here that I want to drive home is those tests were done in 2017, okay? They have done nothing since then. No further investigations, no cleanup, nothing. We have no idea how far the plume has gone. And the Department of Defense claims they do not have the money to do this. I thought that would get a laugh. Okay, so as you all know, if you've read the news at all, PFAS has now traveled down Starkweather Creek and into Lake Monona. That is not a surprise. PFAS are very mobile. Who knows how far they went at this point. And the levels in Starkweather Creek are quite high. Even I was surprised when they finally did the measurements. The highest levels were found just south of the base, just south of one of the burn pits in the base at 3,700 parts per trillion of PFOS and over 8,000 parts per trillion of total PFAS. Now what do those numbers mean? Well, we don't have standards yet in Wisconsin, which is unfortunate, but in Michigan, they're proposing surface water levels of 11 to 12 parts per trillion, and that's so that they don't build up in fish to harmful levels. I just heard the European Union has a 1 part per trillion standard for surface water. So these are really, really super high levels. And of course, they build up to even higher levels in fish. So you saw some of those numbers, 8,000 parts per trillion. In fish, we're finding levels of up to 180,000 parts per trillion. That's a lot of PFAS. So they just recently issued advisories limiting fish consumption further. So environmental justice, that's what our organization works on. Who is most vulnerable to these exposures? Well, the low-income people of color living near the base, the Truax neighborhood, and the trailer park. Our organization works with the Truax neighborhood quite a bit. The middle picture there is our Vice President, Tu Yen, standing in the creek, actually. This is before we knew about the PFAS contamination, and he grew up fishing in that creek, eating fish from that creek and feeding it to his family. And those exposures now cannot be undone, and that's really, really sad. So people who drank water from well 15, which everyone in the Truax neighborhood did, they also had that exposure, and a lot of other people drank that too. And then anyone who eats fish from Lake Monona, and there are a lot of people who fish down at the mouth of Lake Monona, if you know Ulrich Park, they're exposed to these chemicals as well. So Planned construction at the base. Some of this is in preparation for the F-35, some of it isn't. It's very difficult to actually tell. I'm not going to read through all those lists of things there, the list of different projects they're going to do, but as mentioned in the intro video, the April 2019 environmental assessment that was very much slipped through, we happened to see it in the newspaper one day, and I rode my bike down to the library and got the document and went, oh my God, look at what they're doing here. It looks like they're preparing to do this. It slipped through without any public engagement, and unfortunately the city and county didn't have any comments on it, and it was approved. And then recently, somebody discovered that in the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act, they had already approved $14 million for F-35 simulator facility and $20 million for a fighter alert shelters. And that construction is planned to start in April, okay? So 2 months from now. So why does it matter? All that construction will disrupt PFAS in the soils and groundwater at the base and release it into Starkweather Creek. Anytime you dig up to build things, it's going to release into the creek, and they have to do this thing called dewatering, which means sucking up the water and then releasing it most likely back into the creek. And since it's really contaminated there, they haven't cleaned it up, it's just going to make the problem worse. So the other thing that was already mentioned, I'll just skim over this. If the F-35's are located here, they're made out of these very high-tech materials, nanocomposites, carbon nanotubes. They start burning. I've read reports done by the Air Force. They can burn for days, and they have to spray a lot of foam on it. So that's just also going to exacerbate PFAS problems. So I'm almost through with this, and I have to skim over this really fast, because who has the authority and responsibility to prevent more PFAS from getting into the creek and the base, and will they do so? Actually, a lot of different entities can do something. The Air National Guard, we already know, should be doing things, but they're not. They're saying they don't have the money. The DNR has a lot of authority to enforce laws that we have on construction, on stormwater runoff. The county, which owns all the land, or not all of it, most of the land under the base, okay? They have a lot of power to do various things as far as, enforcing laws, construction laws, stormwater laws, and the city also has some authorities and responsibilities. Now, the Air National Guard, the county, and the city are all also responsible parties for some of the PFAS contamination at Truax Field, and that means broader than the base. But so that complicates matters because everyone's worried about their liabilities. So, as we said, Air National Guard says, DOD says there's no money. City and county are mostly saying they can't do anything, deferring to DNR. DNR is already moving forward with talking to the Air National Guard about these new construction projects. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, given that DNR has allowed toxic pollution from Truax Field to ooze into Starkweather Creek for decades, should we really be assured by this? I'm not, actually. So what can we do? Well, what we're doing here, educate, engage, organize, testify, demand that city, county, and state use their authorities and responsibilities to demand full PFAS investigation and cleanup at the base before any further construction goes forward. And for more information about some things we can do, feel free to contact me, and I can hook you up with things we're doing to try to address these issues that I raised. Thank you.